In today's episode of Our Road to Unicum, we review the Tier 7 and Tier 8 Czechoslovakian medium tanks. These are the T-34 100 and the TVP VTU. A lot of players complain about these tanks. I certainly had a very painful experience grinding through the Tier 8. I actually found the Tier 7 to be surprisingly functional, and it's because of a couple things. One, it has best in tier silver penetration of 175 for Tier 7 medium, and that's unusual. The Tier 7s across classes are a little bit of an awkward tier since they face Tier 9s, and some of the tanks don't have functional silver penetration to deal with opposition, you'll see, whereas this tank actually has pretty solid penetration with its top gun. It also has pretty good speed. What makes the Czechoslovakian Tier 7 and Tier 8 tanks difficult to play is they have a combination of relatively poor gun depression. Like this tank has -5 degrees of max gun depression, and it also has fairly weak armor. So that's a pretty bad combination, poor gun depression plus weak turret in terms of doing any kind of ridge fighting. I recommend on this map in Overlord generally playing between the 5 to 0 lane. So that's the middle to the eastern half of the map. You know, as I talked about in the last video, going someplace like beach really doesn't make a lot of sense. You can get easily countered if you reach the A or C lanes, and you'll be isolated from your friendlies, and moreover, the terrain resistance is really bad and you can get shot at by tanks that are above you. So this lane here in between the E and F 9-0 area is a pretty good pivot point to play, and my snapshot there misses. The main thing about playing this position is that you'll get shots that are kind of northwest of you, hopefully good shots, and then if the enemy tanks push down south to get a shot on you, your tank should be able to punish them and get flanking shots. So this heavy tank is pushing pretty aggressively, and what should have happened right there, you saw two friendly shots go by and they both failed to hit that heavy tank. So I'm not really feeling very supported by my friendlies here, and you kind of have to assess, especially when you're solo pubbing, what kind of support and coordination you're going to get from other friendly players. And in this case, if I'm not going to get the support out of a squishy tank, I'm going to go ahead and play the other flex side of this, which is over near the F9 position. And they do have a tank in the back, a T20, who is exposing himself a bit unwisely. Now, what you want to do, if you want to snipe toward the back, there's some bushes that you can hang out around B9, C9 area, and the T20, since he's out in the open, is an easy shot. Of course, we also have to be careful about Artie. The Artie's kind of firing in our direction. The T20, it looks like he's making the mistake of overexposing his tank. It looks like he was looking at the Cromwell that we had over toward the middle of the map. But you kind of got to keep your head on a swivel here. And definitely because I've already lost, almost half of my health, I'm being a little bit on the careful side. And what you can do is get the first shot advantage. So a guy like this who's driving up and over the ridge is going to give me the first shot advantage, and he was looking more at the T29 in front of him. And if you're a medium tank, there can be that kind of desire to use the speed to push in aggressively, but a lot of times you got to be patient, especially if you're in a squishy armor tank. Like right now, I'm letting this guy drive into our field of fire, this heavy tank, and then we're punishing him. This is what you should do at this particular pivot point, is get two angles of fire from the right, fire from in front, which is exactly what we did, and then I get tagged by that Artie. And you can hang out by the hills. They'll offer some protection against Artie, and there I don't burn my repair kit because there's nobody other than the Artie who we've seen on that 9-0 line who can punish me where I'm sitting. And that's one of those things where ideally, not just from an income efficiency perspective, but you don't want to burn your repair kits unless you really believe it's going to help you mitigate some damage, because you might get tracked and really need it later. Now, you may remember from the light tank guide that I did, the episode 41, you can push down the 0 lane once it's been cleared, and here I get a pretty sweet shot. There's just a sliver of that Artie between the tracks of a dead tank, and I get the nutmeg shot. Certainly it's a low percentage shot, but there's no reason for me not to take it, and because I penetrated him now, he's one shot for me, so most likely I can kill him before he'll be able to get put more damage into me. And certainly, when you're playing a squishy medium tank, that's always a big concern. And also, there don't seem to be any snipers providing cover from the 9-0 lanes. And sometimes if they've got unspotted tanks, you want to keep an eye on the shell tracers that are coming by, or friendly tanks around you get killed by someone, to watch, in this log on the right-hand side above the mini-map, who's killing whom, so it'll give you an idea of who might be in front of you. It's a really subtle thing, but paying attention not only to the mini map but also to the kill log, and then if people bounce shells off of you, seeing who you bounced it off of. And because I don't have a lot of hit points, I can't be really aggressive in terms of pushing down, but I do want to try to find a good field of fire, and then by pushing down along the A line, what this is going to allow me to do is to get some flanking fire on this Swedish medium tank, and so I get a really nice shot from distance there, and there's really nothing he can do to protect himself from this fire except continue to back down the hill. And I get a shot here through that haystack, kind of guessing where the silhouette of his tank is. And the Hall of Fame hockey player Wayne Gretzky often said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So especially in a tank where there isn't going to kind of be any ammo capacity problems, you want to go ahead and snapshot and minimize your exposure. So there's a T-43 kind of dug in here. Now, really where he should have been playing is down near the sea lane. This slope coming up from the bottom, because he can stay mostly hull down because the turret is pretty decent. A place like this where he is, eventually I'm going to flank him, and then this is a Russian medium, so he's got pretty good agility, backs up immediately, and I don't want to give him the shot. Now the problem is if I pop around the corner, it looks like I can tell by looking at this kind of top-down view, he's continuing to aim in my direction. So if I pop out behind the rock, he's going to get the first shot advantage, and it's possible that he could shoot me and then pull back behind hard cover before I can get a shot off. And so I'm being a little conservative here. If I had more hit points to work with, I could push up. And you could certainly say this guy can't one-shot me, right? He's probably got the 180 alpha damage gun, so it would take him 2 shots to kill me. But nonetheless, since we have a numbers lead, I'm giving a little bit of time for one of my heavies to come over for support. The main thing is I need to be ready to pop out and shoot, because that T-29 is one-shottable, and then Russian medium realizes, as soon as I pull out, that he's going to take some flanking fire, but it's too late for him. So the T-34 100, you may remember from the last episode, I talked about the relative stats. I actually had a 69% win rate in this tank, which was a surprise to me, that over 1,400 damage per game, but it really goes back to the gun. Above average alpha of 250 per shot, and then that really nice 175 millimeters of penetration. So let's take a look at the TVP VTU, and in my opinion, this tank is every bit as bad as its reputation. And there are a couple things, like moving it from the Tier 7 to Tier 8, you actually lose speed, and then the armor, relatively speaking, is even worse than it was at Tier 7. Like the turret has even less protection. You do gain 1 degree of gun depression, which helps a bit with terrain, but the main problem with this tank is that, just like with its predecessor, the combination of poor gun depression and a weak turret means you can't ridge fight really well. And that's part of the reason why you see me kind of driving around in circles here. I'm kind of looking at our friendly tank deployment, and I'm not feeling so good about going down the 0 lane for a couple reasons. Railroad is better from the south spawn. They have better fields of fire and can get flanking fire more easily. And then, because my tank has neither a strong turret for protection nor good max gun depression, if I'm going to be ridge fighting, I'm going to have to come over the ridges pretty significantly to be able to get my gun down and fire on opponents, and that means that I'm going to be forcing a lot of exposure. Typically speaking, on tanks, I'll select the combination of like best penetration and mixture of accuracy and DPM. And so for over half the battles that I played in this tank, I played over 100 battles in it before I unlocked the Skoda T50, I was running with the 88mm gun, and that has 240 alpha and 194 silver penetration, which is decent. It's not bad, but the main problem is that the 88mm gun, while it has better DPM than the 10.5 centimeter gun, the problem is that with a tank like this where you've got a high rate of fire, if you have a relatively weak armor profile, you can't really use that theoretical maximum in terms of reload speed because your armor is so brittle. So what I actually found was more, to my surprise, was more comfortable, effective, was running the higher alpha gun, which has lower DPM and slightly less penetration, but taking those pop shots and then sitting back in the hard cover. You notice earlier I got a damaging shot on that Tiger 2, and that went through his turret face. And again, with the Wayne Gretzky saying, you might as well just take the shot, and I probably penetrated him through the flat front of his turret face. And it's a bit of a lucky shot, but I was in position to try it, and I might as well do it because you can work in some of that early damage and weaken him from when he gets into city. Now, the main thing about hanging around these buildings, you need to be careful to not get spotted by the tanks that are up on that ridgeline where that 30 is, and that 30 we just absolutely wrecked him, so he's just got a sliver of his health. But remember, if tank destroyers are moving up onto that ridge, in general they run binocs, and so when he's moving up to that hill, those binocs are not going to be active. It lowers the chance that you're going to get spotted, right? Whereas, like as a typical medium tank driver, I'm running optics, so I've got full-on view range all the time. Now, I took one shot to try to knock down a building in front of me. These destructible buildings can really mess with your field of view here, and so it's like a double-edged sword. They offer you some protection, but they also limit the shots you're going to be able to take. And when you're a tank that's not the top tier, or in a tank like this TVP VTU, which is mechanically inferior relative to other tanks, all you need in a given time, really any tank, but including this one, is just have one target at any given time that you can fire upon and put your gun to work. The problem, typically is if you can shoot at them, they can theoretically shoot at you. And I'm taking some very safe shots there at that AMX heavy tank, and he's got his hull kind of sideways to me, which, if I hit it, it's most likely going to be a good penetrating shot. That T95 obviously is a brick wall, and, medium tank drivers will sometimes try to engage a tank destroyer from range to try to run up and flank, but it's way too early. Like, there's no way that I can go and flank that T95. Even if I did manage to get behind him without him shooting me first, there are multiple tanks behind him that would easily pick me off. So, in a case like this, you've got to try to be patient, even though it is kind of like counterintuitive. And what I found is that in a lot of games where I've been too aggressive for early damage, and here I'm going to try to see if I can knock down some of these buildings. Some of them are destructible, some of them are not, but I've got spotted again, and I can't really stay here. The problem is that their heavy tanks, and now their T95, are pushing up far enough into city that pretty soon they're going to see me, and with this tank's fragile armor and low DPM, I don't want to get caught in a brawl because this tank is simply not built for it. So, and you can tell here, we're getting smashed in city now. They've got a bunch of strong tanks there, the Mauschan, the Defender, the T95, and so I'm going to try to switch. Now, the thing is, we have to do something. We can't let them win both city and the east side of the map. If that happens, then we're going to get sandwiched, and that's a pretty rough spot to be. And we are down 3 tanks, so I can't afford to be too passive here. The tanks that are pushing from their side along the zero lane, if they win the initial exchanges in the southeast corner of the map, a lot of players will make the mistake, in my opinion, of pushing straight up the zero lane, because they will eventually be out in the open where you can shoot them, because eventually the land becomes pretty level with railroad tracks, and you can get flanking shots in the tanks if they push north. And I'm clicking on the map because I recognize we've got an opportunity here. We've lost city pretty badly, but this T30 is now isolated, and so I'm communicating this on the mini-map and sometimes, like, your friendly players won't pick up on this. Our Type 59 is totally seeing it, so this is great. We're going to go 2v1 Wolfpack him. But a lot of times I'll tell people what my intention is, especially if I've got the opportunity to just put it on auto aim, or sorry, just cruise control, and type while I'm going. And here I make a mistake. I didn't want to cut off the Type 95, but I shouldn't have completely stopped. I should have kept moving so that the T-30 didn't get a shot at me, and he did. And I'm super lucky he didn't hit me for like 750 alpha, because in a match like this where you're behind, you've got to conserve your HP as much as possible. All right, now at this point where the railroad is, there is a little bit of a slope. So I want to see if I can spot targets and get 1 or 2 cheap shots before I need to relocate. But the T95 is pushing straight across along the sea lane, which he should. He's got such a strong frontal armor profile. He can kind of move down into that ditch and come up and spot us. So that means I'm going to have to reposition. And so there are a couple things to keep in mind here. The T95 has incredible frontal hull armor. It's super hard to penetrate. Even with premium ammo, even if I were running the APCR, it would be really hard to penetrate him frontally, right? Extremely difficult without getting a very high roll penetration shot, and that's only if I hit him someplace like on one of the very small cupolas or the very bottom sliver of the lower hull. But that's a difficult shot to take from range, let alone with a gun with mediocre accuracy like this one. So the 30's starting to just come up above a hill, and I take a shot. It doesn't land, but we can polish off this 30. This is the same guy, I think, who I spotted on their Sniper's Hill earlier on the D lane, and we just absolutely wrecked him. Now, our Type 59 has done a good job. He's actually pushing up and pressing on the Faraday. And the Faraday's, he's got a problem that he's a turreted tank. He's once he sees the Type 59, he has to kind of flip himself around and watch this. Right here, I'm really careful as I come up on this hill. First of all, I don't knock over a tree. I don't want to give away my approach lane. You can see somebody from the opposing team when they drove this way knocked down the tree, but you generally want to avoid, knocking down destructible hardcover. And I've gotten shotgunned by Artie, blind fired and killed because I knocked over a building and they just fired my direction. Now, notice that the reticle is yellow. And I'm not taking the shot because I'm trying to see if our TDs can shoot at him, so I'm just passively spotting. But, in a moment here, he's going to be up on the ridge, and so I take a shot, and what I just did there was huge. I dropped him into one-shot territory for us by shooting the top of his roof. Now, a lot of tanks, obviously, they're built to deal with frontal engagements, and that's where the armor tends to be the strongest. But for the vast majority of tanks, if you can shoot down on the roof is actually very thin, and that's true for most tanks, including the T-95. So I was able to shoot down on him, and generally speaking, that's why the high ground can be useful if you're aiming down on tanks, or in the case of that T-95, as he was backing up the slope, in front of his hull is pointing down, so I could shoot down on his roof. And then, here, I just don't have a shot available, but it's okay. I'm going to stay here and just keep him lit. Like, even the top of his cupola is there, not penetrable. If he gave me more of a shot, I could take a shot to either try to track him or to try to get a penetrating shot, but I don't really want to get spotted by him because his gun does so much damage. And we've managed to kind of stymie their advance for now. And thankfully, our charioteer is doing a nice job of staying alive. Really, as long as we've got him here working with us, we have a shot at bringing this battle back and be able to get a shot down into the autoloader. I knocked down the tree to get back here, and ideally I wouldn't do that because if Artie's watching the map, he's going to know where we are. You might have noticed a while ago, one of our friendly players was calling for our Type 59 to cap, and I talked about this so much, but a lot of times ignorant players will think that that's the best tactical option, and it really isn't, because if we have one guy or even two guys trying to cap and one of their tanks goes back and spots the cappers, they're going to get reset by Artie. So our Type 59 was totally hunting for Artie and pushed all the way up along the AB line to get up to the Artie, and he found him in city. And the Artie did the right thing in terms of positioning himself up there. He should stay where he might be able to get some help. And obviously once we kill the T30, the eastern side, and the 30, the eastern side of the map is open. So the defender is now behind us, and we either need to push south and take out the defender or push north and take out the T-95. T-95 is the highest threat vehicle that they have left just because the gun and the armor can be really problematic. But we take out the T-95, which is huge, and then I managed to pick off their medium tank here, who was kind of more facing towards the charioteer. Now, I do get spotted, and since the defender is looking my way, I need to cut to the left as hard as possible and reduce his field of view on me, and he misses pretty badly. And, we're clicking on the map here. Somebody's clicking on the map, and we can't really worry about the mouse chain. Don't care about him right now. He's not the priority. The defender we can isolate between my platoon mate, Ruach, and I, right? And so I've got more hit points. So, the defender can't one-shot me. Now, it might be hard for me to penetrate him, in which case I would just drive around. If he comes facing toward me, I'll try to get around the backside of him and hope Ruach can finish him off. But I get a pretty fortunate shot there that not only penetrated, it set him on fire, and then that chews away the rest of his hit points. So we now are in a very good position to bring back this match. The other reason that we pushed hard south on the defender is because we wanted to take him out quickly instead of waiting passively for the defender to come to us, because we don't want to get sandwiched by that T-34 E1. Autoloaders are super dangerous in late game situations, and he could clip me out if all four of his shots land. Right, so the next thing is to go pick out that autoloader, and he's taken some damage, so that's good. With autoloaders, when you're facing them, autoloaders, it's a very weird class to play. Like, I've often seen bad players complain that autoloaders are overpowered, and they're certainly very good at dishing out a lot of, damage if you make a mistake. And the best way simply to counter autoloaders is, don't get clipped out. Don't put yourself in a position where you're going to eat a lot of damage, and just wear them down over time, because what they're terribly bad at is doing single shot exchanges. And so we're just doing one shot at a time between Ruach and I, and picking him off, and then too late he decides to cross over and try to attack us. Now, this battle, we totally lost map control. We lost city, we were losing east, we managed to come back and take east, but the outcome of this battle would have likely been different if their Maelstrom had pushed down toward us. I generally recommend, if you're on the east, if you win the east side of the map, you want to push down in the ditch along the route that I'm going now. If you win city, generally speaking, I actually recommend going into this ditch and pushing along this way. A lot of players will go down along the A lane. You can do that, but you'll be very exposed to any campers they might have up by like A980, and you'll also be very artiable. So generally speaking, coming along the inside of the lake area, down in the ditch area, is the safest way to approach enemies. And in this particular case, for whatever reason, Mousechin doesn't show his head. And when I was driving over toward the city, I was trying to find out where he was, and moreover, if I do spot him, just to harass him, to slow him down so that he can't go back and reset our cap. So I managed, we had a pretty good late carry there, and I managed like around 4,300 damage, and did a fair amount of damage from distance, and that was by, especially in the early game, getting some damage by peeking between those buildings and hitting their backline tanks over by the Sniper's Hill. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'd like to give a shout out to O3DG for his PayPal donation. I'm going to be covering some different tanks in upcoming episodes, including the Stridsvagen 103 and the AMX 30. Take care.